The Republicans' holy grail, the Durham Report, will not be released before the election, and there is an excellent chance if and when it is released, its pages will be blank anyway. And the most vile attorney general in American history, William Barr, has let Trump know this. So reported the political website Axios this morning. A congressional aide briefed on Barr's admissions and a senior White House official are the Axios sources. From Trump to Barr to the average white nationalist and fascist who support them, the words Durham Report mean everything. They see it as the key to the entire persecution of Trump, as the key to everything in the QAnon delusion, as the key to their bizarre brew of paranoia and sadism from which they drink daily. In reality, it is the last bit of William Barr's alchemy by which this despicable and corrupt man has turned the utterly necessary and urgent investigation into the coordination between Trump's campaign and Russian operatives in 2016 into, quote, Obama has spied on our savior. Barr has already claimed dozens of reputations and careers, but he had promised Trump that the investigation of the Russian investigation done by this federal prosecutor in Connecticut, John Durham, would land the big fish. And so, as Trump has constantly bleated, Trump wants Barack Obama arrested. Trump wants Joe Biden arrested. Trump wants Hillary Clinton arrested. Trump wants Emmanuel Goldstein arrested. Trump wants Palpatine arrested. Trump wants Tracy Flick arrested. You get the idea. This is the nightmare scenario, Axios quotes its congressional source in today's story. Essentially, the year and a half of arguably the number one issue for the Republican base is virtually meaningless if this doesn't happen before the election. Well, of course it's meaningless. It's bullshit. It's straight from the dictatorships of the old Soviet Union or a banana republic. A criminal like Stalin or Trump throws out charges against other leaders. Almost instantly, everybody on both sides is suddenly suspect. And if everybody is suspect, all the charges against everybody are suspect as well. This, I think, was clear to Barr, but not to Trump. So when Nancy Pelosi said today that it was obvious Trump's judgment was being affected by his COVID-19 drugs, I think she was mistaken. First, Trump's judgment is being affected by news that his imaginary cavalry and Dick Tracy and Sherlock Holmes and his mommy are not riding in over those hills to save him. Secondly, what do you mean Trump's judgment? Trump has no judgment. The delicious sidebar to the report about the Durham non-report is that Trump has now turned on his previously favorite thug, Mr. Barr. To be honest, Trump said, Bill Barr is going to go down as either the greatest attorney general in the history of the country, or he's going to go down as, you know, a very sad situation, Trump said between throat clearings on Fox yesterday. He's got all the information he needs, Trump continued. They want to get more. They keep getting more. I said you don't need any more. So Barr, I think, is now the next victim. Good. There are worlds in which William Pelham Barr is not betraying the laws and Constitution of the United States and his oath as its Attorney General and his personal code as a lawyer. There are worlds in which Mr. Barr is not using Donald Trump's crimes as a pathway to enable more crimes, not using the law to subvert the law, not using justice to strangle justice. There are worlds in which Bill Barr is not trying to reshape this nation into a theocracy and unlawfully pervert its laws to support his own religious beliefs. There are worlds in which Barr is not a character from Stanley Kramer's film Judgment at Nuremberg, not propelling this country into fascism, not subverting all that he was sworn to protect just to rewrite the sorry, pitiful, trivial outcome of his forgotten tenure as the boy attorney general under the first Bush in the 90s. There are such worlds. We are just not living in any of them. The amoral and the venal who have crawled out of the Trumpian woodwork without rest or surcease these 5 long years are so many and so morally jaded that to somehow rank them in terms of their utter selfishness and complete contempt for anything but authoritarian government seems impossible. But if you had to pick one, besides Trump, who has sold his soul and sold out his country the most thoroughly and the most nauseatingly, you could safely choose William Pelham Barr. It is Barr who has constructed this petard on which he himself is about to be thrust sky high. There are crimes, betrayals of a nation, of honesty, of truth. They are committed in plain sight. At a news conference, Donald Trump asks Russia to obtain Hillary Clinton's emails. Russia then steals them. Trump is then elected because of them. Then there is the amusement park mirror version, fabricated to make it look as if Trump is the victim instead of the hoodlum, in which the machinery of the state, whose power Trump has seized, is redirected to comforting the comfortable and afflicting the afflicted. Then there is the modern Spanish Inquisition, starting as the original one did, with the presumption of guilt and working backwards until a sacrificial lamb can be found and publicly humiliated and blamed for crimes that exist only in the inquisitor's mind. As you and I both know all too well, in this administration, this process is by now old hat. Just as Barr perverted and buried the evidence in the Mueller report, that in the Trump campaign connections there were to Russia, not just smoke and fire, but conflagration. Now he is scrambling to do something to undermine Durham and save himself. He tried to do this to his own Department of Justice Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, who last January went witch hunting inside the FBI and its investigation of Russia and Trump and didn't find a single witch. He may now try to do this to Durham. He may neuter him as he neutered Mueller. He may humiliate him. Or most likely, he will simply pinion him for Trump to attack him and degrade him and make his word the synonym for whatever number, chapter of the mass madness this happens to be. And then he will set his Trump flying monkeys at Fox News and Breitbart and Facebook off to screech his name and please these self-martyring conspiracy theory manufacturing lemmings of the lunatic Trump fringe. Barr is the failed son of a failed bully of a headmaster fired at 2 different New York area prep schools just before he would have run each of them into the ground. One of them was the one I graduated from just as he arrived. His father was a martinet, a theocrat, and a fraud. This Barr was the ex-CIA summer intern who would later push for more prisons and no more paroles. Barr was the legal, quote, mind, unquote, who argued for pardoning Casper Weinberger in Iran-Contra, who argued for illegal wiretapping of Americans' phone calls to other countries, who argued for rendition, who argued for sending U.S. law enforcement into other countries to kidnap people, whether the other countries wanted us there or not. And Barr was the last Attorney General under George H.W. Bush. 15 months of 15th century justice, the last failed employee of the only incumbent Republican president to lose re-election since Herbert freaking Hoover. He was washed up at 42, justly, aptly, and irrevocably consigned to the dustbin of history. And then Donald Trump needed someone to use the laws designed to protect freedom and safety in this country and twist them and turn them into weapons redesigned to destroy freedom and safety in this country. He is the Ernst Janning character from the movie Judgment at Nuremberg, based on a real-life German jurist, Oskar Rotthaug, who, to stay in his profession, to maintain his influence as a judge as all around him fell in political purges, convinced himself that facilitating the perversion of justice was to in some way mitigate that perversion, when all it really was to preserve himself and his influence and his prestige and his money. We knew the words were lies, and worse than lies, the screenwriter Abby Mann has Burt Lancaster as Janning say in the climactic scene of that movie. Why did we sit silent? Why did we take part? Because we loved our country. What difference does it make if a few political extremists lose their rights? What difference does it make if a few racial minorities lose their rights? It is only a passing phase. It is only a stage we are going through. It will be discarded sooner or later. The country is in danger. Find the difference between that Hollywood version of the jurist who first bent the law, then broke it, then destroyed freedom with it, and Bill Barr, back after 26 years of hard-earned obscurity, willing to bury the deceit and crimes of Trump and to fabricate deceit and crimes by those who investigated Trump. The only difference that you will find will only be in scope, not in intention, only in the deaths and the wars, not in the amorality. And perhaps, though, there is also a difference in the outcome. Barr has now displeased the emperor with no clue, and so Barr will be lucky to make it through Election Day in his job. Good. Let's go through Friday's headlines now, and there are a lot of them. I'll do them quickly. Trump has now announced he is going to schedule over the weekend, probably tomorrow, an in-person campaign event and an in-person appearance that he will make at that event at the White House tomorrow. Hundreds of people and Donald Trump, who is still infectious with COVID-19. Why is he doing this? Obviously, because there are some people he missed last time. Number 2, Mike Pompeo says today that he's going to, having found them, release more of Hillary Clinton's emails. Well, that's it. I'm not voting for her. Number 3, Trump was on with Rush Limbaugh for 2 hours this afternoon, roughly that. His voice sounded okay, not necessarily as sick as he did on Fox, but then he said things that reminded us that it doesn't matter what his voice sounds like, it's the fact that it's the voice of a crazy person. What he said to Limbaugh was this, and I'll clean it up slightly. If you F around with us, Iran, if you do something bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before. I don't mind the language, actually, and I don't mind it being used in, quote, diplomacy, unquote, but I do mind somebody who swears because he thinks it covers up the fact that he has nothing in his hand except his Limbaugh. The next one, Trump engineered a sudden windfall in 2016 as campaign funds dwindled. This is a New York Times report that tax records showed that he got $21 million in highly unusual payments from the Las Vegas hotel that Trump co-owns, routed through other Trump companies, paid out in cash at a time when Trump's campaign was desperately short for money in 2016. The upshot of this is he may have illegally financed his own campaign and claimed a deduction on it. Trump? Cheat on his taxes? Doesn't everybody get a $72 million, $900,000 refund? Connected to this, the Washington Post has a different tax story involving almost exactly the same amount of money. 5 years ago, Trump promised to preserve about 150 acres of woodlands on his New York estate that's called Seven Springs. He received a tax break of $21,100,000. The 2016 appraisal that valued that at $56.5 million is the reason he got that much. But $56.5 million valuation for that plot of land turns out to be more than double the value assessed by the towns that have parts of that land in it. So he has 2 simultaneous but different tax scandals involving $21 million each. The next one, more serious, about Governor Whitmer of Michigan and the attempt by right-wing terrorists to kidnap her and overthrow the government of Michigan. As noted in many places, Trump's only concern publicly since this terrorist plot against a governor of the United States of America was revealed was that she hasn't thanked him because his FBI came in to break it up. And his last tweet about her and Michigan and this nightmare of right-wing Trump-inspired terrorism was, Governor Whitmer, open up your state, open up your schools, and open up your churches, which were the exact demands of the terrorists. Lastly, and on a much lighter note, Trump is trying to get the debate moderator for the next debate, C-SPAN's Steve Scully, a man who has grown old and gray and even more impartial in the service of a grateful nation, trying to get him kicked off because he was once an intern in Joe Biden's Senate office mailroom. Steve Scully, Trump tweeted, the second debate moderator, is a never-Trumper, just like the son of the great Mike Wallace. Fix! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point! They're trying to discredit Scully by noting that he briefly served as a mailroom intern for Joe Biden's Senate office in 1978. Ooh, the mailroom, the nerve center of a senatorial operation where the interns make all the decisions and talk to the communists and the Russians. I think that Trump is just upset that Steve Scully used to work for a living in a mailroom or just worked anywhere. Good night and good luck.